All right, let's talk about Loki, episode 5. We only have one more episode to go. Loki is, I think, by far my favorite Marvel show so far. I loved WandaVision. I loved Falcon and Winter Soldier. But as far as, kind of the Marvel-esque, comic-y style stuff, I think Loki is my favorite so far in some ways, and in some ways it's not. And what I mean by that is, personally, I've never liked the multiverse crap. To me, it's like a cheat code, the multiverse. I mean, you can kill people and get away with it. You can bring them back. You can just say, oh, he came from Earth, 473. And that's one of the reasons I didn't watch any of the new Star Trek movies except for the first one until they destroyed Vulcan, and then it destroyed basically every show I'd ever watched. But they kind of have a get-out-of-jail-free card, and they just said, oh, no, it's the multiverse. It's an alternate reality, an alternate universe. It's not the Captain Kirk that you know. Well, then I don't want to watch it because I want to see the Captain Kirk that I know grow up and talk and go through Starfleet and all that kind of stuff. So I've never enjoyed the multiverse stuff. But if they do it right, it's okay. If they don't cheat like that and just, they're able to get by with anything. So Loki is good. I've really been enjoying it. And this episode was not my favorite episode. I think it's getting a little bit over the top. Obviously, this will contain spoilers, so if you hadn't seen it, skip on to the next section or whatever. But, obviously we saw in the last episode, Mobius as well as Loki get pruned and end up in the void, as they call it, which essentially is a place where everything that's so-called pruned, you thought originally they just, were wiped from existence. They actually end up here on this planet, I guess. I'm not sure. And that's what we saw in the background is a bunch of different stuff from a bunch of different eras of time. They got pruned, timelines they got trimmed off from the TVA, all that good stuff apparently. But we all figured out, and we were all correct in the aspect of the Time Lords were not real. So, of course, the idea is that Loki and Sylvie end up here because Sylvie obviously prunes herself in this episode to join Loki to get, she's willing to die with him essentially. But they want to figure out how to get the hell out of here because they said no one ever returns. And there's just this big weird cloud monster there. You see all these variant Lokis. Obviously, you have old school Loki, older Loki, you have kid Loki, you have alligator Loki. All this stuff is from the comics, so they're all there, and they've all been pruned at some point for some timeline. He meets all these variations of himself, these variants, as they call them. And essentially, it's a little bit just, it's kind of like a circus, literally, in this show. In this episode, I mean, so I didn't hate it by any means, but it was just one of the weaker ones. And then to get off this weird planet, it was good to see Mobius again, by the way. So Mobius is there too. Obviously, he got pruned, and we see Mobius. He has a pretty cool scene. He comes up in a pizza delivery car that got pruned out of some timeline somewhere, and helps rescue Sylvie. They kind of make up because he, of course, now realizes that he was, essentially kidnapped from his timeline somewhere. And that's the whole thing: is where's all this coming from? Are these people missing from the main timeline in the MCU that we've watched in all these movies, or is it from different timelines? And that's what I mean. They can kind of get by with what they want with all these, different timelines as far as multiverse stuff. But it is leading to Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man. I'm sure they'll do multiverse as well into the Spider-Verse stuff, as well as Ant-Man and Wasp, where we're going to have Kang the Conqueror. And of course, that's a big theory that Kang the Conqueror is behind this. So anyway, she figures out how to enchant this fucking cloud monster, and Loki joins in, real Loki joins in, and he figures out how to do it too somehow. And they essentially just touch this little part of this cloud monster while it's focused on the USS Eldridge, which, by the way, is a pretty good little Easter egg there. It dropped out of the sky. The USS Eldridge, for those that may not know, is from the famous Philadelphia experiment. Of course, that's since been proven to be bullshit since the USS Eldridge was never in Philadelphia. But the point being that that's what it was from lore. And this is what I do enjoy about multiverse stuff is these little Easter eggs they can do. So from the real world, for example, we have the Devil's Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle where ships and planes go missing. We have the Philadelphia experiment. All these things in our own lore. And then in these movies, we can see what actually happens according to how they write these movies. So I think that's pretty cool as well to see stuff like that. So that's one aspect I do enjoy about multiverse stuff. But anyway, she's able to enchant, or they are able to enchant this thing, and it just kind of just vanishes, and a hole opens up, and there's some kind of city behind there. And we've all speculated in the past. I did a video a couple weeks ago that I believe this may be the quantum realm, because it would make sense for where time doesn't work the same way as everywhere else. That's the only time we've heard this reference before. That way, it explains why Infinity Stones, the Tesseract being an Infinity Stone, all that stuff in magic doesn't work at the TVA, so it's somewhere outside of time, and that's really vague, obviously. So if we go back to the comic stuff, it seems to be pointing to Kang the Conqueror. as far as him being the big villain, which he's already been cast in the next Ant-Man and Wasp movie as well. So Kang the Conqueror will be a villain in MCU, so this seems to be setting that up. But of course, we said all this before. In WandaVision, we said it was going to be Mephisto pulling all the strings, but it was just Agatha. And Falcon Winter Soldier, the power broker ended up being, Sharon Carter. And in Loki, we're saying that it's probably Kang the Conqueror, but it might just be another variant of Loki himself. But I did pause this episode and looked at that city. It didn't look like Kang's city called Kannapolis from the comics. It didn't look like the comic version of that. Now, of course, they could change that, but we did see that bubble from Ant-Man and Wasp that I talked about in the previous video. And in the quantum realm where you had this little bubble city in there. So they could still make that happen. And I think that makes more sense. And it kind of leaves the main stuff alone as far as all that going on in the MCU as far as Endgame and all the Avengers movies, because that's what I said before is if you have a place where Infinity Stones don't mean anything, they're fucking paperweights, and everything's pre-written and everything has a destiny, what's the point of anything we watch in the MCU? So that would really kind of keep it separate, but really cool at the same time if somehow Loki took the Tesseract from Avengers Endgame and ended up in the quantum realm, and he's got to figure out how to get the hell out of there. This was not horrible by any means. I just think it's a little bit over the top and weird because they don't know how things work here. And yet they kind of just guessed, hey, I'm going to try to enchant this cloud monster, and it fucking worked. So, oh well, we'll see what happens in the final episode next week. One episode to go, and that show's gone, and we're on to Black Widow coming out July 10th, and then Spider-Man comes out in December, and that's the only two Marvel movies we have of this year. And Black Widow, starting July 10th, is the official beginning of Phase 4.